Welcome to Keep the Hotel Empty. Today we've kept the hotel empty for Lou from Discord Theory, a band that straddles the horizon of all types of alternative rock. So we're very curious to hear about your journey, Lou, and I couldn't thank you enough for coming. So welcome, my friend.
Hey, pleasure's all mine. Super happy to be here. Huge fan of your work, everything you've done. Persephone's Choice. It's one of my favorite interviews you've done.
Oh, thanks, man. We were actually just talking about them. I'm stoked for their new record coming out.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I know you just put out a new single with a B-side. So I want to try to get us to that point because I feel like that one's a big culminating point of all the things you've kind of done to this stage.
I agree.
So this is what we do, and we do it no matter if it's a musical guest or not, but when a musical guest is on, it's fitting. Let's press rewind. Okay. Take me back to where music comes into your life and how you start to kind of identify yourself as a musician and music starts resonating with you.
So definitely back to like in middle school years and those times where like, not to age myself, but you know, they're like Green Day's American Idiot and Blink-182 self-titled album were coming out, and like Linkin Park was all the rage a couple years before, and that kind of like generation kind of got me into music and kind of made it like something that I really enjoyed and like something me and my friends would listen to a lot. But then I started going to Warped Tour and getting into bands like Bayside and like even Paramore and all these other more like niche bands, I guess, for the time, not so mainstream. And they really started influencing me on how I perceive songs. And as much as I still love Blink and Green Day and all those bands, a band like Bayside really taught me that there was more to songwriting and a deeper depth to the lyrical value in the songs and how it could affect people or even make someone feel better, feel worse, you know, help them through a time. And I really wanted to do that for other people like me because I always felt, you know, a little bit of an outcast coming from Ecuador. I moved here when I was 8 years old and, you know, never fully felt like I was ever part of any inner circle or anything like that. You know, I always felt like the outside foreign kid that talked a little funny. So I always wanted to make music for people that felt like a little bit of an outcast and kind of help them get through their problems in life. And I always wanted to not just write about love songs and more write about, I don't know, people's experiences and their hardships. And how do we overcome them and become better people after that?
When you had come from Ecuador, did you come from Ecuador right to Florida?
Yeah. We were originally supposed to go to New York because that's where New York, New Jersey is where my mother was born. Her parents and all my family's from Ecuador, but they lived here for a while, so she was born here, which makes me very lucky because I'm a U.S. citizen, which a lot of my cousins and other friends that I have that are immigrants aren't. But yeah, she chose Florida instead because she thought the weather was better, more comparable to Ecuador, so she thought we assimilate better. But I'm glad we ended up where we are. I mean, I love my life, so.
So when you came here, had you had exposure to like American music, or was it like the whole American pop culture scene? This was a big wide open door at 8 years old.
The most like exposure I would have to like American music would be like Backstreet Boys and like NSYNC and that kind of stuff. Like, you know, that was just like everywhere that you couldn't avoid no matter what.
Right.
But even then, to be honest, like I would listen to my sister's Backstreet Boys and NSYNC CDs, and I used to know all the words to those songs too. So even then, like I always kind of had like a connection to like catchy and like trying to connect it to music in some way. Yeah, and I always really enjoyed it. Yeah,
yeah. Pop music isn't a dirty word.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So when you came here, did you have musical influence from like your family, or you came here blank slate?
Some of my family members play music, but not so much in like the alternative space as much. You know, more in like the Latin kind of space. So I had a little bit of influence for them, but not to discredit their influence, but I don't really think that's anything that ever took me to that like next level. It was more like I said, going to concerts, and I became involved with the local scene at a very young age, like 13, 14, with my high school friends. Shout out to my friend Austin from Pet Lizard, who we used to go to shows all the time in high school, and his brother's band Select Start, and seeing them kind of make it, even if it was just like in a regional or whatever MySpace level, really also inspired me of like, man, this is totally possible. You can totally do it. Maybe you're not going to be Justin Bieber or Blink-182 or whatever, but you can have a viable business or at least make it something, I don't know, that's a part of your life and people enjoy and you can connect with it, even if it's just a small community.
Right. That's a huge motivator to have out of the gate. But as you're going to like Warped Tour and you're seeing these shows and you're starting to see kind of what it takes to do this and think that it might be something you could do, had you started playing at this point, or are you just making all observational things and just thinking to yourself, I'm going to be ready to go and I'm learning all this?
No, I was already playing like guitar, acoustic, mostly like my sister's old acoustic guitar. That's what I started on. And I would just like learn songs like Green Day or like Linkin Park or Blink-182. That's like really where I got like my foundation of songwriting. But at first it was just more for fun. And then like the more that I got into it, the more I was like, man, this is something I really want to do. And the moment I got on stage, you know, that's when everything really changes, you know?
So what was that first time on stage? You remember that first time?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a first time where my sister let me play her wedding, but I don't really count that as much because, you know, it's like a family event.
That was Summer League.
Yeah, but back to Select Star, they let us open up one of their shows, and I was so nervous. And like people see me rock out so hard now, I was like basically just like dancing in place at that show. And but still, you know, they had a great crowd because they were one of the biggest bands in that day, at least in Tampa. And so just that rush and just, I don't know.
So what's the road like from when you first start playing to getting that? I mean, that's a good first gig to get.
Then just kept playing locally and working on my songwriting. That's something that's very important to me. I don't really consider myself like a guitar player or even like a vocalist. I must consider myself more of a songwriter, composer. So that's something I really study when I listen to music. It's like the composition. So that's something I really started honing in and playing with people and, you know, started other bands and all that stuff and being in the scene, making connects as much as I can. I always like to say that I did go to college for a couple of years, but I felt like I went to the college to rock and roll more because I really like, as soon as I turned like 18, 19, just really like got into the scene as much as I could, even more than when I was my teen years because I had my own car, you know, and going to all the shows that I could, meeting people like Tom DeGeorge from Crowbar, getting connected with him, or Lazy from the Orpheum or any of those wonderful gentlemen I get to work with these days, and just deepening those connections and researching bands, learning the community in other cities.
So you've always had this arc of trying to learn more about what's going on and plug in even more.
Yeah.
So what's the road like from what is effectively your first band? Let me ask you this. When you open up for Select Start, are you Discord Theory at that point?
No. We were called Imaginary Friends, you know, easy core, pop punk kind of stuff.
Okay.
So as I said, I've been in a few bands since then. I'd say my main band after that was this band called The Invention Of. That was like short-lived for a couple of years. But I'd say I learned a lot of really good songwriting working with that group of guys. That really took me, I feel like, to another level. And then I basically took what was supposed to be that band's next album, and that was what became the first Discord Theory EP. So for most of the bands that I've been in, I'm usually like the backup singer, co-vocalist kind of vibe, even though I wrote the songs and I was like all the lyrics, I wrote the melodies, you know, the main foundation. But everybody would tell me, you know, they're your songs, you sing with more emotion. So Discord Theory is the first project where I finally was like, you know, let me be the front man, let me see how, if I can do this, you know. Like I've always believed in myself, but there's always been like, having a more distinct voice and not the more like traditional singing voice, a little bit of doubt, you know?
Right.
Or like, you know, even people in life telling you that maybe you can't do that or maybe you should just focus on the guitar or something like that. And I'm very proud to see that Discord Theory has taken off quicker and, you know, bigger than any of those bands. So I'm not just going to say it's just because I'm the singer now. Obviously, I have a great crew of people that I work with. But it is a very proud thing coming from having other people sing your songs to now, I do feel like a full-fledged frontman, you know, and people actually singing their songs and like at the crowd and know the words, and there's no better feeling than that, you know?
Right. So when you first make that jump, were you at all nervous, or was it just excitement overriding because you had taken the time to get to that point and it was on now for you to sing your songs?
I would say more the latter, yeah, where I was very excited and ready for that moment and always kind of like was a personality on the stage, so it almost felt like it was like my calling that I almost had been holding myself back. So I honestly wish, nothing against anybody that I played with, but I wish I even like, if my singing wasn't up to par at the time, I wish that I would have been the lead singer of my first band. So like I could have been growing even sooner in those aspects of like, you know, the leadership or the frontmanship of the band. But you know, can't look back. I'm happy how it all worked out. And like I said, I did learn and grow a lot from everybody I've ever performed with or worked on music with.
Yeah, and really, amen to that.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game, when you can stay open-minded enough to learn from people that you work with. So I do want to backtrack just a tiny bit. What's the road like for you when you're first cutting your teeth? I'm talking your first band rehearsal with whatever that band was, to when you get your first gig opening for a known band. How did you get yourself from we're just in a room to on stage?
You know, it really comes from the love of music between a crew of friends. I feel like any real band starts that way. Whatever happens after that, you know, is what it is. But it really comes from loving a certain type of music with a crew of people, and you're like, we want to do something like that. So, you know, I've always been around like musicians and alternative people. You know, I went to Blake High School down in Tampa, and that's a performing arts high school. So I was always around musicians, artists, all kinds of creative people. So I was also very inspiring, and, you know, pushed me to always want to be better. But actually, what you're asking is like one of my favorite parts of being in the band is that whole like creating the brand and kind of cultivating ideas. What do we want to sound like? What are our influences? What are we going to like dress like? What is going to be our logo? You know, and there can be a lot of like trials and a lot of hardships with that, and a lot of butting heads. But, you know, there's something about the finished product that I really love, and the combination of ideas from everybody. And that's why I always wanted to be in a band and not be like a solo project, because I like the combination of ideas of everybody and not just my own idea. But how do we get to that? I guess to try to answer your question a little more directly, just working on the songs a lot, you know. That's and working. Feel like we take a lot of time to think about what the songs mean and how not only do they sound on record, but how do they impact the crowd live. And that's something I really try to think about in the set. So does that answer your question a little better?
Yeah. But you brought up something that made me curious along the way there. When you're talking about having collaborators come in, and especially when you're writing material that other people are going to play with you in real time, this is something that, as a creative entity, it's I use the word precious. Sometimes it can be hard for people not to get precious about that sort of thing. What are some of the strengths you think that you have in your songwriting process or in your creative way of being that helps you stay open-minded in the way as to not get precious about this and just try to stay focused on, like you said, the group of guys coming together and being greater than the sum of the parts?
I would say that's something I had to learn through time, because I used to be a lot more meticulous and a lot like trying to write every part a little more thoroughly, and that's something where I've stepped back now, and I try to kind of write the roughest version of the song possible and then bring it to the table like that. That way I leave a lot more room for myself as well to not get so attached to parts necessarily, or be like, maybe the second verse can be a little more open and have like a bass thing going on or something, instead of, you know, I already wanted the second verse to be like this. I already got it all figured out. It has to be like that or it doesn't work. Yeah. So I do try to kind of have a little more raw and like more, you know, I guess like less all put together version of the songs, and just kind of have some basic rhythms, and mostly the vocals is the main thing that I do kind of have like the main gist of and kind of know. But even that, I try to leave some room to interpretation.
Are a lot of your seeds vocal melodies?
Yeah, that's where I would usually start in my head. I hear something, I'll hear a little vocal melody somewhere, sometime in my day, you know, whether I'm at work or, you know, just hanging out or at a show and or having a moment or something that inspires me, and I get a little vocal melody or a little lyric line, and that usually kind of involves the whole song. I usually try to write the music based on what the lyrics are.
That's unique.
Yeah. I've heard that actually. Most people start with the music, but yeah, I usually have at least, maybe not all the lyrics, but at least like an idea of what the meaning of the song is going to be about.
Yeah, some kind of theme to build around. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna do this one in some kind of like Quentin Tarantino timeline mix and match here. You said something before that I always like to touch on when any type of
or
creative,
Memento.
Yeah, that any type of creative person in here brings up, and that was that you had this around you in high school. Tell me a little bit about what that was like for you, and in hindsight, what importance you attached to that.
Just, you know, when you're in high school, there's so much stuff that is going on around you, whether it's like sports, or, you know, like I went to this like really creative school, and I didn't even go for music. I was in visual arts. I like draw and paint and stuff like that as well. And music just overtook it, like my creative passion so much. I would say would be from going to those early shows and just being in, like, I don't know, just like the dirt of it all, you know, and seeing from the worst bands to like, wow, this band should be way bigger than they are. And just that, like, it really implanted a feeling of me. Like, it really helped me get through high school and a lot of like tough times that I was going through at the time. So it really implanted this feeling that anybody can get through anything with the right song almost. And I guess that's what I'm just trying to bring back to the world, and try to write the right song for everybody when they need it, you know?
So music started to kind of convey a different sense than what visual art had.
Yeah. I guess it spoke to me in a deeper sense than visual arts had before, with just like the lyrical depth. Like I said, you consider myself a huge lyricist. It's like I can enjoy a simple lyric, but the songs that really stick with me as something that have like really clever or insightful lyrics. And yeah, and just inspiring hope through lyrics. I feel like the world is very dark sometimes, very hard. But, you know, a good song can turn the room around, you know?
Very true.
And I don't know. I just felt that a lot, felt in myself through music. And I just always wanted, during that time of high school, so I always want to just bring that back, maybe in a weird nostalgic way, but also, and like I said, just showing people that, like, hey, you can be this person and not know who you want to be, but then you can have aspirations and become who you want to be. Even though I'm not like a super famous rock star, I've done everything I've ever wanted to do. And that's another huge thing that I guess I saw in bands like Select Start, or even other bands on like Warped Tour that were smaller, that I want to show myself, but also my fans or my friends or my family.
Or a combination of the three.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this then. Do you feel that if you would have been in a quote unquote normal high school, that your path would have been different?
You know, I've actually asked myself that many times, because my high school experience was very impactful to me. And I would say, yeah, honestly. I mean, it's hard to completely say, you know, because, you know, we don't have a time machine. We're not in the Invincible Wars right now, or, you know.
Right. Well, the reason why I ask is because I think it's hard or sometimes it's foreign for people who don't have any type of creative proclivity or anything like that to understand the significance of having those outlets at that time of life for certain people. So I'm always curious, you know, and you said, you know, how impactful it was for you, like how much of a difference that made, because I think it's something that a lot of people just, you know, it's easy to
or having good role models or mentors growing up and that kind of stuff. That no, definitely.
Yeah, huge.
And I'm sure I'd still be playing music in some way, but maybe I don't think I'd be striving for it the way that I am, or thinking of it as such like a valuable thing in not just my life, but in a lot of people's lives, you know?
And that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing right there. Okay, so now let's Tarantino back it out too. We're playing some shows. Your bands are starting to pick up. You're post-high school now. Talk to me about how you're wading through college, navigating this artistic bone, but still like whatever path you think you should be doing in life.
Well, you know, just to be honest, like my mom's, she supports my music career, but she's always been like, but why don't you finish school, or kind of vibe, you know, or like, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? And, you know, and I understand where she's coming from as an immigrant and having to work really hard and all that stuff. And she just wants me to be, you know, safe and, you know, have money to you know,
be secure.
To live, yeah, exactly. But I don't know. There's just, none of that matters to me, in the sense of like, I'm doing everything I ever wanted to do. And can we go back on the question a little? Can you just reiterate the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm curious, like how you start to, because this is another thing that I feel like happens to a lot of creative people. You start to have to navigate the fork in the road where passion is really pulling you one way, and in your case, your desire to share with people what's been shared with you. Yet there's still this pull where it's like, oh, dude, I'm in college. Oh God, I got to.
Oh yeah. So yeah, especially how do you navigate my mom, because my mom's like that main force, kind of pushing me in the other direction. But unfortunately, that's where we butt heads a lot. But I just kind of always had the tenacity to say no. This is what I want to do, and I'm willing to risk it all to do it, and I'm willing to live with the consequences of that, And
what are some of the things that you feel come into your life that reward you to give you that strength to say something like that?
People telling me how much my songs have affected them personally. That's probably the biggest reward. And they point out lyrics or ask me what they mean and things like that, or hearing them singing along at shows, because it is hard, like I miss a lot of family stuff when you're on the road sometimes. You got a recording session with like producer that's already planned months ahead of time, you can't change stuff, or you have a show that weekend that you already been planned, and they're doing your nephew's birthday that weekend, even though that's not his birthday that exact day, so you didn't think to take off or whatever,
right.
And there's always that side pulling me that, but there's I do have like the satisfaction of knowing that I'm impacting people, and that really makes a huge difference to me, because that's all I ever wanted to do. And I see the growth every year in the band. Even some years might be less than others, but I've never felt like the band has stagnated in any way, And there's been harder years for sure. But yeah, especially obviously through the pandemic and all that stuff. But yeah, I never felt like we ever took a step back. It's always been a step forward, and we always had bigger goals, and we've always achieved them. So those are the kind of things that keep me going and keep me staying on the not getting a regular job path.
Yeah. So would you say that the human connection you're able to create and feel is the backbone of all those things?
1,000%. I would say that's the backbone of the whole music scene and community, because there's nothing like having a whole room full of people all connecting in one moment, one song,
Yeah. Yeah, amen to that.
That stuff's powerful, man.
I was feel towards where I'm going to say that's powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you leave the band and you've got this body of work that you're turning into the first Discord, did you put out an LP first?
No. Oh, it's an EP, 6 songs. So yeah, those are like the main 6 songs that came out from that. And obviously there was changes of people, and they changed a little bit because I don't sing like the guy that was in the previous band and stuff like that. But I'm proud of that first EP. But I really think we kind of like found our sound and what we really wanted it to be with our LP that came out a couple of years ago. And really, I feel like that cements what I want to do forward. Our first EP was a lot more like post-hardcore vibes, which we still have in all our music, but it is a lot more of an angsty kind of vibe, which I was definitely more feeling at the time. But the more that I make music, the more that I live life, the more that I realize the music I want to make is more hopeful and more happy and more, I don't know, I just want to make people feel like they can be the best version of themselves, not question if they can be.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the pandemic. When you did this first EP, where are you at timeline there? Are you pre-post pandemic there?
That was pre-pandemic. So this is like around, that EP came out like 2018, and then we got a good reception of that. And then in 2019, we did this contest to play with one of my favorite bands that I mentioned a couple of times, Bayside, and we won that, and we got to open up for them in late 2019. And then we played Gasparilla Music Festival early 2020, the weekend before everything shut down.
I was going to say, that's right on the cutoff there, yeah? Okay, so you were going full steam. Your train was on the tracks.
We were very happy where everything was going. And, like, the pandemic definitely slowed things down, but I really didn't let it defeat me. I just thought of, like, well, we just got to change what we're doing. So started doing a lot more online content, kind of stuff, which we know. It's where everything was evolving anyway.
Right.
Focused on writing this album, that kind of stuff.
So this LP, a lot of that came from incubation period of pandemic, yeah?
And I would say it's very inspired by a lot of those feelings that people were having in that time, around that time.
And were you writing all those songs solo, or were you guys getting together and you were fleshing it out with
like
with
I said, I
collaborators?
usually have like the foundation, which by that I mean like the rhythm guitar and like the lead vocals down usually
Okay.
for the most part. And then that's what I bring to the table, and then we work on the rest of it together. You know, I might have like one lead guitar line or two, but for the most part, like I said, I like to see what people's ideas are, and then to the parts that I had, and then how do we kind of meet in the middle to make something even cooler.
So your favorite thing as far as the songwriting goes is once again is the melody. That's where you're lying.
That's definitely that's where pulls my heartstrings. A good vocal melody.
Well,
like
the top line can be a mad struggle for people, so that's a gift in and of itself.
Thanks.
Okay, so you're getting these songs together. How do you approach recording then?
So we record with this gentleman called Lee Dice. He's actually one of my all-time favorite producers, so I'm very lucky and fortunate to work with him. He's recorded some of my favorite albums, including Mayday Parades, Tale Told by Dead Friends, or From First to Last, Dear Diary. Also, he recorded Select Start, so they're the ones that actually connected me with that full circle moment. Yeah. No, I owe a lot to those guys. And he's a great producer. He works with me a lot in the sense of, I wouldn't say he's like super changing songs, but he works on me and like getting the tones. And what I think the most value he has as a producer is that he really like tries to figure out what works for you and how do we make that better, and how do we like what makes you great, and let's bring that forward, you know?
Right. Were there any of those things that he brought to your attention that you didn't notice in your own stuff?
Sorry. Not that I can think of at the time, like anything like, but definitely he definitely pushed me vocally in a lot of parts to do some harder stuff.
Like things you weren't familiar with?
Or like change melodies in ways that I wasn't thinking of and stuff like that, or reach higher notes that maybe that's not where I was landing before.
So when you go to record, do you do it primarily just you and your producer?
Oh no, we go all the whole band, and we spend like a few days out there, and you know, we work on everything. We usually try to have everything very demoed out beforehand, obviously, and I show them the demos before. And yeah, no, we go out there, spend a couple of days on like a couple songs, and then came back and then went back. So it probably took us like 3 times of going up there till we were like done. Probably could have used 2 more, but you know.
Yeah, you can always say that.
Yeah, but then you still, you know, and then it's like budget, but also like, is it really worth for this one little tiny thing to, you know, go out there another day? But yeah, I'm very lucky to work with him. He's a great dude. Literally was just talking to him the other day for like an hour. I consider him a good friend and mentor as well. And yeah.
Yeah, very valuable to have people you like that you can trust.
And that you can feel vulnerable in the studio.
Right.
That's one of the toughest parts of being a recording musician. It is like having that like comfortability in the studio.
How do you think you developed that?
Probably during COVID too, honestly. During those times, me and my buddy Justin, shout out to him from Holly Glen, me and him work on a lot of music, and he records all of Holly Glen's music, and he's worked on a couple of our songs too. So me and him during COVID, just like we're recording anytime had time, which was a lot.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of that time that I spent just hanging out and making whatever random fun demos with him, I feel like really leveled me up as like where I feel comfortable behind the booth. I would say definitely before that I did not, you know? Definitely have a lot of the nervousness of like, man, why can't I sing this part that I've sang a bajillion times? But you know, there's just something about, I don't know, the moment of like when you don't feel like comfortable in the space, you know? And it's not necessarily pertaining to anybody else that you're working with. It could be a personal thing too, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I ask, you know what I mean? Because sometimes it wouldn't matter if you had the greatest producer you trust in the world. Sometimes it's just in your own skin. You're uncomfortable for some we don't know reason.
Well, it's like the same thing, or like how do you become a great stage musician? It's just doing it a lot. The more you do it, you know, that the better you're gonna get, the more comfortable you're gonna get.
Yeah, I guess I can agree. There's no substitute for experience.
Exactly.
So you're getting these songs together, you're getting ready to record. Did you set out to record an LP, or was it just that you had this much material it turned into that?
No, I definitely wanted to record an LP. There's like a little bit of a concept to the album, which is, very loose. I had bigger ambitions for it, a couple more songs and maybe some like kind of spoken word segments. But like things started taking too long, honestly, where I was just like, we need to get this album out. And I don't want to have to wait another 2 years just for 2 more songs or something like that or whatever,
Right.
And I felt like very strong about the songs that we did already have done for it. And I felt like everything was still, like the themes that I wanted were still in there. But it really is about losing your mind at sea and thinking about all the things that you could have done different to get to this point and all the people that you love that you wish you could come back to. And then overall giving you the strength to kind of overcome the sickness of the craziness, I guess. And to kind of have a second fight for life. And like I said, it is kind of like a metaphor for like what a lot of us were going through during the pandemic.
Right.
And it also is like the album's very much a metaphor for my life too in a lot of ways, because it is like a lot about me coming to like the U.S., like I was telling you, and my feelings of isolation sometimes, growing up or just in life in general, Doesn't have to be because I'm an immigrant, but I'm sure everybody can feel that for a lot of reasons. But,
Yeah.
that's just one way that I relate to it, just because I always felt like, I didn't always get all the movie references or like, all the stuff from like growing up here or whatever,
Right. I guess that's got to be fuel in its own way to make your own references, huh?
Which if you ask my friends, I try to do a lot.
Hey, it's fair game.
Yeah, I make up my own stuff all the time.
So what's the title of that record?
A Ways from Dire Straits.
Love that. Okay, so that's kind of a strange tact for artists at this point, to put out an LP, to say I want to put out an LP from the gate, to make it a concept record. Did you feel that was a bold move, or it was just like that was what you wanted to do, I'm doing it?
I feel like we did it in a very strategic way where we did, like I mentioned before, I really do try to study the industry as much as I can and see what other bands are doing that I enjoy that are bigger. So we did do it like where we dropped a couple singles leading up to the record and all that stuff. So I think we did it in a very cohesive and a very productive way where I didn't feel that weight of the record thing. And I also, I am not a believer in these boxes that people put themselves in the industry. It's like, yeah, people say this is what you should be doing and you should be doing this like this and that like that and don't do that. But then any artist that breaks any waves does whatever the fuck they wanted and didn't listen to anybody. And that's why they broke through or made a big wave, So obviously there's a balance to that. You do want to listen to like what the industry's doing, but you also have to accept that you want to do what you want to do, and you should never sacrifice your art for that. So I never really felt that way. And I felt like all these songs, and we're not like that kind of band anyway. I know we're kind of like somewhat of a pop punk band or like an emo band or whatever, but I see the band a little bit grander than that. And I hope that comes through the music, because I do see us closer to like a Bayside or like the Deer Hunter, and I do want to have bigger themes and just the music to feel bigger than life, like more of an experience than just, you're listening to a catchy song.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because we are at a time where you mentioned a lot of shoulds, and I always say you got to be careful not to should all over yourself. And it seems like you're good at that, so that's a good thing.
Thank you.
But it can be tempting to say, well, we just can be an emo band, we can be this and this and that, because it automatically makes you more palatable when you have like some niche you can exploit or some trench you can dig deeper.
It's a double-edged sword for sure, I would say.
Yeah, how does that make you feel?
Like we're not pop punk enough for the pop punk bands or post-hardcore enough for the post-hardcore bands, but at the end of the day, most of the music I listen to isn't either or like that either. They're never... Like all my favorite bands, every album feels like its own album and its own vibe. And that's something that I also want to emulate and never be stuck in one place. But But it can be a challenge sometimes, but it can also be a strength because we can go play with some harder bands, but we can also go play with some indie bands, you know? So it puts us in a good place where we're very flexible on the lineups we can be on. But I do agree when it comes to like playlisting or sometimes stuff like that, where it's like we're not pop punk enough for like the super pop punk playlist, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's got to be weird too, because as you can take in all this different information and you can go from scene to scene and all this type of stuff, it gives you all these ideas. How do you sort of tell yourself to use your creative instinct still as your beacon? Because it seems like you've done a good job of that.
The band name, I want to live to our moniker.
Yeah,
We're Discord Theory. So to me, what Discord Theory means is, you know, that we're taking multiple genres and, you know, we're breaking expectations, we're subverting expectations with the music. That's like something I really want to do because, like I said, I listen to, you know, all this music all my life, and as much as I love pop punk music, you know, I hear a million bands that all sound like New Found Glory, you know?
Right.
And I love New Found Glory, but I want to have a part that sounds like New Found Glory, but I don't think I need to make a whole. I'm never going to do it as good as New Found Glory, basically, is what I'm getting at, you know? So my way to kind of combat that was like, why don't I combine all these elements of all these vast genres that I like and put little hints of all of them in a song to not only make a journey through the song, but also that's how I make my own genre or make something different, you know?
Right. Well, how do you? But it seems to be that the part of that becomes difficult is then how do you navigate between smorgasbord and somewhat of a focused message?
I try to have a balance of maybe like one song can get a little out there, but then like, you know, we got to have the next song kind of be a little more. Maybe every song subverts expectations in one way. That's what I'm saying. I really try to live to our moniker. Like every song has to have at least one part that you didn't expect. It could be like 90% of the song is like a straight up pop punk song, but it's gonna have like one of the pre-chorus is gonna have a little bit of a reggae feel for some reason. And so I try to have that balance of like, you know, we have our more ambitious songs, but then we have our kind of a little more, you know, tightly put together songs. And then just making sure that even if it is kind of like an ambitious song with a lot of parts, that they're all catchy and they all have like their own relevance to the song. And something that I think of a lot is like what makes a listener want to listen to a song again. So for better or worse, if the part is in there just that one time, they're going to want to listen to that song again just for that one time, that one part. And I have plenty of songs that I enjoy like that. And I don't know. So I try to think of like clever ways of like, I try to think of the listener's perspective just as much as my own perspective.
Yeah, that can be really hard to do.
Yeah.
And we've talked to a lot of bands, when you talk about ambitious songs and then, you know, your more straightforward songs, it seems to be pretty ubiquitous that people have a harder time trying to do what you said, that write that something catchy, make that something concise. How do you navigate doing something simple that will still be interesting to you and your audience?
I think that's where like the musicianship comes in a lot of sense, because even like a band like Fall Out Boy that you might think like those songs are super simple, if you really actually watch how they play them, there's like a lot of intricacies into the way that they're playing them. So things like that, adding variety to the parts, like you could have the same verse melody and the same verse chord structure, but maybe the second time that verse comes in, you know, you're playing and the riff is different, even though it's following the same note pattern, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's a different riff. It's a different rhythmic riff or something like that, you know, or you open it up and let the bass write the second verse or that kind of stuff. Those kind of intricacies. And like I said, trying to add like a one part that subverts the expectation of the song as well.
And that doesn't necessarily have to be something like a mixed meter part or
No, like for example, in our new song, there's like a drop and then it comes in on like a trap beat. And just randomly. But I was like, that's like, and it has like a little bit of a breakdown, but it's more of like a ballad, like kind of like a poppy song. But these are just like, I don't know, ways that I was like, I would have not expected that to come in there, but that sounds so freaking cool. So it's
Sold.
like, yeah, exactly.
Love
To
it.
catch people by surprise. And when we do play that part and that trap beat comes on, I always see people like, oh snap, oh snap.
So I guess it may be a redundant question, but is the first part catching yourself by surprise?
Definitely. And that excitement in that moment of like, ooh, that's cool. That's definitely a huge thing for me. And I always have the trouble of like, when I write new material, kind of have to like, oh, it has to be better than my last song. And it's like, what does that even mean, really,
Yeah, well, there, you took the words right out of my mouth. What does that even mean?
Exactly, when it's all subjective. But I guess I'm just looking for that feeling again. So thank you. Thank you for making me realize that, because that's really all I'm looking for, just having that feeling again for this next song.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that has to be the next greatest song, but just that excitement feeling of like, ooh, that's fresh,
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. So I got to imagine when you got your LP out, you were feeling that. I got some freshness on deck. We're ready to go. We're going to Tarantino back to that point. Talk to me about when you start playing some gigs and now you're coming out with some real Discord Theory wind behind your sails.
Yeah. So we came out with the album. We get to open up for some big bands, when they come to town. That's always awesome. Like Hail the Sun, Strawberry Girls. One of my other favorite artists, Andres. He does a lot of good work, and he's featured in one of our songs. And he makes really interesting, like off the cuff. It's almost like post-hardcore meets salsa meets like R&B pop.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he's featured in one of our songs on the album. He's a cool dude. We got to open up for him a couple times. But yeah, so we grind, the local scene a lot, in the regional scene. We go on tour when we can, out of state if possible sometimes. But just really grinding and connecting with people. And I had, before the LP though, I really had a big epiphany about kind of like taking charge of my music career. And instead of waiting for somebody to like make it happen for you, that I needed to make it happen for myself. So I started my own events and booking company. And through that, I started like, that's how I would book Discord Theory out of state and out of towns. I would like not even say my name, to be honest. I'd just be like, yo, I represent Discord Theory. This is my booking company, blah, 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 And then that really kind of helped not only connect me to the local scene even more, but just get out of like in other cities and out of state and all that stuff. And then Tom DeGeorge, the owner of Crowbar, became my business partner along with our friend Randy Ojeda, he's an entertainment lawyer, and really kind of taking it up to the next level. And I do gotta get credit a lot of that because I get to be part of not just my shows now. I get to be part of other people's shows, and I get to book other bigger artists. And whether I'm playing the show or not, I'm always connected to the scene. So I feel very fortunate how connected I've become to it, but it is because I chose to take charge of it instead of being like, well, why am I waiting for people to ask me to play a show? Why am I putting on the show? We're the ones bringing all the people, we're the ones that know the other bands. So
was that really just the impetus of it? It's like, shit, I've done 80% of the work. I might as well do the other 20, and then
then all those years of my younger years that I spent making sure I connected to people like the owners of the venues and the other promoters directly, and kind of that was like a full circle thing where I was like, I have all the connections. Let me started just for Discord Theory, but then like I said, it evolved to like now I put on shows for bands and I do tours for other bands as well.
And what's the promotion company called?
FMAM Events.
Very cool. We'll make sure we got links down to all that.
Please.
So how long have you been doing that?
About like 3 years at this point, like in an official capacity.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we got to work with some really cool artists. Secondhand Serenade for the throwback emo kids. Dochi, recently we had booked at Crowbar. If you don't know who she is, she's won a Grammy. She actually went to the same high school I did, Blake.
Yeah.
Well, so we got Slow Joy coming up soon, who's actually one of my newer favorite artists. I'm really excited about that. So, and like I said, the band was already a good trajectory, but I feel like that has elevated us to a whole nother level where people almost see us as like a beacon of the community.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of that.
Yes, very cool. That actually begs two questions. When you're I guess the first one is the most obvious one. Talk to me about the importance of venues like Crowbar and these places that are still out there supporting bands that are on the come up.
You said we only had an hour?
Yeah.
But no, because I could talk about that stuff for forever. It's like,
because I don't want to understate the importance of it, but I am definitely interested in what your boots on the ground inside of it are.
it's hard out there, man. And not just for small venues, for all the venues. It's, from a Crowbar to even a Deviant Libation, like, or even to an Orpheum, like, or even I bet you Janus is struggling more than they probably tell you. It's the industry has changed in a lot of ways that aren't good for the artist and the venues, and like the money isn't coming down as much as it should, and people aren't going out to shows as much as they were because they have so many other forms of entertainment. And the pandemic really sped up the process of people just wanting to stay at home and watch stuff at home. You got Green Day playing concerts on Amazon Prime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's dire, but it's another aspect I have a lot of hope for because of people I work with, like Tom DeGeorge,
right,
who's a huge advocate for the venue industry, and he's part of the NIVA, National Independent Venue organization, and then he has his artist development company Detour and all the stuff we're doing, and it's going to be a long struggle, and more places are going to close, but if we buckle down and we keep pushing and we keep fighting and we keep reminding people and how important it is at the shows, I'm very positive that we will turn out better in the other end. I'm not sure exactly what all that looks like just yet, but people are gonna want to see shows. Whether it's this, if we're gonna go to house shows for a little bit, to other venues open up, or how that's gonna look. I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think it's going to evolve. It's just going to evolve, but it is hard out there. The numbers are very fickle, to be honest. And
right.
But that's why more people gotta go to shows, to be honest. If
agreed.
you love music, go to a freaking show. It's as simple as that. Not only is that the best way you're supporting the artist, that is the best way you're keeping the community alive.
The whole ecosystem.
Industry. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm very passionate about that stuff, and it's a very personal subject to me, and I feel very lucky to be working with Tom. And, when I was young and I was getting to like wanting to be the musician stuff, I was always wanting to be an advocate for something as well. And never did I think it would be an advocate for the whole music industry in general. But
Atlas doesn't pick his stone.
Yeah, exactly. But, it is what it is, and I'm happy to be doing it. I'm happy to be part of the fight, and
yeah, amen to that.
And I think we'll get through it, and we just got to keep putting on good shows and keep reminding people why live entertainment's way better than watching it at your house.
And that was actually going to be my next question. So what do you think is the value proposition? I already know the answer to this question for me, and I already know you know the answer to this question for you. But what about the people out there that are like, hey, I can just stay home? What do you think is... And you're in a unique position from the booking aspect and having been on stage. What do you think is the unique thing that people are missing out on when they don't come to the show?
That personal connection, not just with the band, but with other group of like-minded individuals. A lot of people feel so alone in this world,
Yeah, loneliness plague is on.
And then that, and like loneliness is a virus. It spreads, and the more lonely you get, the more lonely you want to be almost, And I've definitely had a lot of friends that have shut themselves off from the world and had to kind of push back into the world, and some have refused to, but it is that personal connection that you're making. You can meet the love of your life at a show,
Yeah.
Or you could meet your best friend, It's like going to a place where everybody has at least one thing in common, which is they like that one band, So it's a beautiful place for people to make community,
Why do you think it is beyond the convenience of things at home that the live music performance has become cheapened? I know we're deviating from Discord theory, but this
it's
is
okay. I
But,
love talking about this stuff too.
but I'm well curious about this.
Yeah. It's hard to say. There's a lot of factors, you know. The economy is the first one a lot of people like to say, but I also think kind of the rat race of it all has kind of put everybody in the same kind of like funnel where everybody's kind of trying to do the same kind of thing, you know, and not enough people are trying to do their own thing and break away. So it's kind of cheapened it in that way where, I don't know, how many TikToks have you seen of the same band doing the same TikTok, you know what I mean? And, you know, I'm guilty of that too because, you know, we're all just trying to do what we think works that day or whatever, try to get our song heard. But,
yeah, every squirrel trying to get the nut.
Yeah, but I do think that has a little bit the TikTokification of music and the whole Ticketmaster kind of taking over the industry.
That one will take another hour for sure.
Yeah, and those are the biggest factors to me. But that's why I'm, like I said, I'm very proud of what I'm doing, and I get to see it personally all the time. Like the same people come in. I had a couple homies come to 3 shows back to back the other weekend. I had 3 shows that I was hosting, and they all came to all 3, and they're all different types of music. And
love it.
Yeah, and you know, it's just little strides like that, and just seeing a lot more younger people coming to the shows that I feel like than when I first started. So I feel like it's really like circling back. And I know Machine Gun Kelly is a hot topic, but personally, I feel like he's been a huge contributor to getting the youth back into guitar music and into alternative music and bands like that. And yeah, I think that's how we keep it rolling.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know who I was. I saw an interview and they asked him about it was somebody who's opinionated. And they said, "What's your opinion of MGK?" And he said, "I don't care at all. He's on the cover of his record with a guitar, and that's a good thing."
Yeah, it was a homie from Polyphia, Tim Henson.
Yes. Yeah, I'm with that. I'm with that 1,000%.
Exactly, because all of that trickles down. And he's, you know, both of those records I think were #1, at least the first one. I forgot. The second one was #1 as well. But the first one, at least I know, was #1 for sure. So, you know, that definitely trickled down. And then, you know, that's a cool, you know, waterfall effect because you start at MGK, but, you know, and then you go to Blink-182, you know, and then you start going maybe like a Paramore and then a Fall Out Boy, and then you get in My Chemical Romance, and then you get to like a Bayside, and then you get to a Thursday, and then, you know, you start going deeper and deeper down, and then you're listening to newer bands, and then you know what I mean?
He can be a good gateway guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Or even artists like, I know another controversial artist that a lot of people don't like, Rodney Racky.
Oh, yeah.
And I know he's controversial, and I definitely do think he has like an ego, but at the same time, he is elevating guitar music back into the mainstream, which is a positive thing. And I also do think he gets somewhat of a bad rep in other ways. I mean, I won't deny his ego because sometimes, but that shit's pretty entertaining, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword too.
I think he's a master of that kind of craft of like being controversially entertaining.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think people are like sometimes take it a little too personal when it's like he's just.
It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta be careful not to get the piss taken out of you.
I hope that you put that clip here and he does do a reply video about us.
Yeah.
We put this on TikTok and he does the video with his parrot or something.
Hell yeah. And I'll give a quick shout out to Eric Hillman too. That's MGK's guitar tech.
Yep.
And I know that MGK is incredibly good to all of his crew and everybody on the road with him. So as much as people have a negative attitude towards him, you know, take it or leave it. But
seems like a wonderful person, man. Every time I see interviews, he's like,
yeah. I've known a lot of people in the music industry, and it's rare to find people that universally sing the praise of somebody on the road. And he's one of those guys that anybody I know that's wound up in or around that camp says what a good person he is to his crew and his people.
You're absolutely right, because the deeper you start getting into the industry, the more bad things you start hearing about people that you thought would have been nice.
Exactly. So I want to circle back to one more serious thing, and then we can get you out of here on something fun. You mentioned before your network, and that these people that you've been able to become friends with and work with have really been what have allowed you to let this flower, allowed you to find your way to take these positions, mentors, and now you're doing these things. What do you think is the most valuable thing to go from just having one of these passing interactions in, I'm a band, you're a band, I'm a promoter, you're a promoter, to where this becomes an actual friendship or a mutually respectful building bond working relationship?
That moment when you put a successful event together kind of takes it to like that mutual respect, I guess, where, I don't know. I guess, yeah, mutual respect, I guess, is the word I'll choose to cling to. Because, yeah, once you've both kind of had that, because I've also had promoters that I wanted to work with, or I thought I wanted to work with at first, and then I learned more about them and I didn't, you know? And it's once you have that mutual respect and you have that, like, same vision, that's when I think it kind of becomes that next level relationship.
When you can kind of feel you're both pulling the same direction.
Mm-hmm. And your ambitions are all leaning towards the same things.
Yeah, that's hard to tell when that's happening.
Yeah. But I don't know. I'm a big believer in the energy between people and the energies of the room. And like those sparks don't just happen naturally, you know?
Right.
Whether it's like in a relationship or like, you know, like I said, in a creative or business relationship, it's something that you should nurture and you should develop if that stuff is going on, and you should stick around to those people if they're making you feel that way.
Right. Do you find that it's important that the people in your network become more that of friendships than connections?
Yeah, honestly, anybody you can ask it. You can ask any of my fans. I feel like after a while, they all have become my friends.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. If you're taking the time to listen to my music, I'm gonna take the time to listen to your life. It's the way I feel because my music is my life. So
the two-way street is powerful.
It is, and that's how you make that genuine connection. And it's like, I mean, obviously, like everybody can say that, but it's actually doing it that it can be hard. Trust me, I get a little like socially tired sometimes, but I force myself to, even when I am that way, just because, like I said, it's like the fact that somebody can take time out of their day to listen to your song, it just means the world. And they didn't have to do that. There's a million other things they could be doing, you know?
There's 160,000 other new songs a day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By way bigger artists. And so, you know, that would always just mean the most to me. Like,
yeah, that type of gratitude as an anchor is super powerful.
Like I said, I always try to give that gratitude back. And I genuinely feel like everybody can feel it back, I hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, some people you can tell when they don't. And, you know, I've had those interactions with other artists too where I thought like I didn't feel genuine, you know?
Well, you gotta put yourself out there to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, the two-way street is an important thing, and I'm glad you've identified that. So, and you're able to share it the way that you are. And I guess that's going to take me to the last serious thing before something fun. Talk to me about the single you just released, because that is, like I said when we first started talking, seems like a culmination of a lot of the things you've done, and it does seem to be a very open-ended two-way street. Talk to me a little bit about that song.
It's a very personal song lyrically, but also for the band, I would say, because it's been a kind of a tribulating song to get out. And, you know, we worked on it a lot. Started off as just like an acoustic song I used to play for my girlfriend.
Oh.
So I wrote it for her when we were going through some tough times. And it's about always having hope for tomorrow, no matter how bad things can get, just because you can get through it because the people you love are with you, you know, and that power. But on that sense, I feel like it's one of the most relatable songs I've ever written, because people can feel that way, not just about the relationship, they can feel that way about themselves or what's going on in their lives in general. So lyrically, I feel like it's very important for me. I really wanted to get this song out to hopefully give people that feeling, especially in these crazy ass times that we're living in. But then musically, I think it's exactly what you're saying. It is a culmination of everything we've been working towards. Has more electronic parts, has, you know, it's very well put together, but also very Discord-y. I feel like it's one of my strongest composed songs where I feel like everything fits together very well, very nicely in a very almost mainstream way, but then has enough of like the Discord theory things to not be mainstream, you know?
Yeah, you're not going right in a box.
Yeah. Nah. I can ask my girlfriend. I don't like being put in a box. I always tell her, like, don't put me in a box.
No. and what's the title of that one?
Letters from Atlas.
Okay.
So I did put the B-side.
And that's what I was just going to ask you about. B-side was a little bit juxtaposed, yeah?
Yeah, so that's actually the acoustic song from our album. And I put it with it because I felt like they kind of correlated in a lot of ways of like, one's very hopeful and one's kind of like about reaching an end.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like they seemed like kind of almost like cousins, like they needed to be with each other.
Yeah, they play well together, I feel.
And then it's just another song that I really like enjoyed personally from the album. So I felt like showing it a little more love with the single instead of, because like the last song on the album. So I felt like having it, you know, as the second song of the single to show it some more love.
Yeah, I think B-sides are a cool thing to do for singles.
Yeah.
Bring the B-side back.
I feel like it's underrated these days.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to some people and they were like, don't you think it'd be weird? Because from the album, like, people do that all the time. People have been doing that since like the beginning of times.
Literally
Especially when you
forever
had
and
like
ever.
the 7 inches back in the day.
Yes,
They would do
sir.
the single or whatever song, you know?
Yeah.
Usually it was like your last most popular song is what the B-side would be, you know?
Right. Or some album track that the artist loved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or an unreleased track or acoustic version or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's another song that I feel like a lot of people that are like diehard fans of the band really connected with. The acoustic one, Shipwrecked. So I don't know, just felt like I wanted to bring that feeling to this song, but also from that feeling with the new song evolved, you know?
Well,
the
that's
feeling.
taking the care to make some relevancy in what you're presenting instead of here's the last song I finished, we're putting this one, and then this one, and then this one, and this one. That gets a little bit rat racy, I feel, for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now something fun.
That wasn't the fun part?
No. What are you most excited about in the sphere of Discord, and what do you want people out there who are maybe just finding out about you for the first time, or people who are been riding with you for a minute, to be keeping their eyes on the skies for most?
New music. That's like my main goal right now as like a human being.
Yeah?
I want to put out as much music as I possibly can. I have so many songs in my life, you know, whether previous projects, past projects that I like never put out, and kind of done with that part of my life. I'm just, you know, I'm getting older. I wanna have all this music out. That's like my main goal right now, is to have more music out. And obviously we're gonna continue to play and continue to tour and continue to get out there. But I feel like the more music I put out right now, and don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna start putting out a song every 2 weeks or once a month or anything, but just faster than we have been. So look out for that. And, you know, we're going to do a lot more out-of-state stuff soon. That's the plan, too. Not soon, but it is in the works. And go to a lot of places that people have been asking us to go to that, you know, we haven't been able to because we're down here in Florida. But so that kind of stuff. And, yeah.
We're on the island of Florida.
Yeah. And then, you know, I would also want people to just remember that a kid from Ecuador came to the United States with nothing and made somewhat of a music career, so they can do whatever they believe they can.
Hell yes. I love that. Empowerment is what we're all about here. I appreciate you sharing that, my man.
Yeah.
Well, Lou, I can't thank you enough, man.
Dude,
I'm so grateful you came down here. I'm grateful for your conversation. You're KTHE fam now. You got a spot here anytime.
Please.
And, you know, I can't wait till you come back and see what is in the next round for Discord Theory.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you, brother. Great interview, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Of course.